Robin Peel. Talk about, there's been some subtle changes to the title of the presentation because dimension management in the cloud, the product which will be released hopefully by the end of this year with all the caveats that go with that. The name has gone through a few iterations, and I think we've ended up on one which is not the one that was in the original conference presentation thing. So we'll talk about that a bit later. So I know Kscope doesn't really like salesy pitch vendor presentations. I am with a vendor, I am with Oracle. I'm a sales consultant with Oracle, but I'll show you my history in a minute. I am actually leaving Oracle on Friday, so this is my last official duty with Oracle. So if I do anything wrong, they can fire me. So there you go. So I'm obviously going to be talking about a future product as much as I can and Dev really wants me to do. So I apologize if I don't go as deep as you want, but when I turn the recording off, maybe then we can have a real conversation. So otherwise, then the people that matter probably won't hear about that. Safe harbor matters. We're talking about a product which, in the way that we're allowed to talk about it, we're hoping to see by the end of this year. I'm hoping it will be, you will see the production product at Open World. It's made big advances in the last month while I've been on vacation in Europe. So I think it's looking like it will be something quite usable at Open World, and that will be what hopefully will go GA before the end of the year. So the big process is getting it ported to be live on the cloud platform, so that will take a few months to actually do. So what I was going to talk about was, first of all, you see why I'm not calling it a product, the product formerly known as Dimension Management Cloud Services. I'm not calling it that. I'm talking about dimension management on-premise and in the cloud. And I was going to talk about where we're coming from, what the DRM legacy is, and what DRM itself can actually do for you in the cloud. Because it's not, you don't need this new product to drive your cloud applications. Steve will vouch to that. Where we are now, of course, we are heading to the cloud, and what do we want from this vision of a cloud-based application for dimensional governance, and what that product is going to, the capabilities are going to be, and what it is going to look like, or whatever we choose to call it. So that's what I was going to try and cover. I don't know how long it will take. I'm happy if you interrupt me. I'm not easily offended. I'm originally English, so we're used to being offended. So say whatever you like. So, but I'll try and keep us on track to get through this. I'm going to try and go through the first bit a bit more quickly so we can have more of a discussion about the actual cloud product. So, come in, guys. Good. Who is actually DRM users right now? Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Who doesn't know what DRM is? Good. Good. Okay. I'm glad there are so many users here. Steve Davis doesn't know what DRM is. I'll speak to Juan and correct him on that. So a little bit about me. It has to be about me because I'm leaving on Friday, so I have my resume in my bag, so if anyone actually wants a copy of that. So my background is in the British railway industry. I spent 12 years in operations management and then business planning for British Rail and then business planning manager for Intercity. We did not have decent planning systems back then. They weren't steam locomotives, and I was there in the age of diesel. But so we actually built a lot of them ourselves from first principles, which was a lot of fun. I built capital investment planning programs and then went to actually do the business side and ran the investment planning process for Intercity. Then I did a similar thing at London Underground. I ran their capital investment program as a business manager. I actually had the title capital accountant, and good God, I'm not an accountant, but I had that title for a while. But we didn't have any systems to put those things together, much like you might do with CapEx planning and planning. We didn't have any of that. So again, we built our own solutions for that. And we spent about £1 billion a year, probably, well, these days it's about $1.2 billion on capital investment on London Underground, which is quite a lot of money on capital projects. A fleet of 90 trains is expensive. So I came to this country, and after a few years of data modeling, I joined a little startup company in Austin, Texas, and as employee number 4, and we eventually created this product now known as DRM, as originally called HCS, CCS, the Hierarchy Control System and Chart Control System for Bank One, and a team built that in the Dallas area. We productionized it, made it more generic to actually do anything. We called it Maslow briefly, then got a cease and desist letter from Mr. Maslow's family, and then renamed it Raza, and we were Raza Dimension Server. And I'll show you a little bit of the history, if this goes on. So back in 1066, William the Conqueror invaded. That's the only date you have to remember in English schoolboy history. So I was at my 40th school reunion 2 weeks ago in Northern England, and it was so funny. It was like not dissimilar to Hogwarts. It was very, very funny being there, and I was remembering all these schoolboy jokes. So we originally built DRM as an internal project for Bank One and then genericized it. There's all the logos across the top. I won't go through all of this, but there's a big change when we went to an N-tier architecture instead of just a simple client server. They kind of didn't do much for a while. They got better. Hyperion bought us. They called us Hyperion MDM, Master Data Management, which caused endless confusion. Then we became DRM, Data Relationship Management. Again, not a name of great beauty, but I think Mr. Ellison actually picks those names. And more recently, we've added DRG, the workflow module within DRM. Who uses DRG? All of you guys who use DRM use DRG? No, you don't. Okay. And then late last year, earlier this year, we came up with DRMA, a little analytics module that sits on the side and gives you a little dashboard around it. And we actually optionally sell that as part of a suite that includes DRM, DRG, and DRMA. But that's a sales discussion we're actually not going to have. So that's the history. It's quite long. And I joined this company in 1997, so I've got 20 years through this long line of history here. So if you need a copy of it, it's kind of interesting to see where it came from. I kind of think it's kind of fun. I like digging out the old logos. That's kind of nice. So come on. There we go. So just to clarify, what is DRM in 2017? It has the 3 modules. Does this kind of line up with what you think DRM is? It's about governing hierarchies. It is. I'm picking my words carefully. You might want to call it multi-domain MDM. I actually prefer domain agnostic because multi-domain suggests it will do a lot of interesting things, a lot of power. But DRM doesn't know anything about customer deduping. That's not its intention. But it can manage any domain. So I think domain agnostic is a better name for it. Most of our customers use it, like probably why you guys are here at Kscope, right? Use it across Hyperion applications. Most of them use it for something non-Hyperion, I think most do. And many of them use it for something non-Oracle. Many of them use it for something non-financial, like product hierarchies, geo-hierarchies, physical assets, things like that. That's what DRM is. For those people who haven't really seen it. The governance module, called DRG, adds fairly simple configurable workflows on top, which are easy to configure and quite powerful, and that's actually been developed quite a lot recently. It's all usual kind of governance stuff. I kind of like it because it's all configuration. There's no coding, there's no scripting in there. It's all configuration. So you can build quite sophisticated workflows fairly easily. Steve may disagree about the practicalities of that, but the theory is that they're easily modified. There's not a lot of coding with a SOA application. I think it's actually fairly straightforward. Then the analytics module on top gives a dashboard. So I just want to give you a heads up where we're actually at right now. And as we talked about in the session yesterday about the future of on-prem, we have a reasonable plan to keep investing in the on-prem DRM for quite a while to come. Now, our product management team did a session on Sunday and on Monday for specific customers and for the partners. Was anybody at those sessions? I know you were, Steve. So a few people were at that, right? So Rahul went through, he's our product strategy guy. We do have a roadmap for DRM going forward, adding some things into it. Again, with all the caveats about the roadmap issues and the safe harbor and all that kind of stuff. There are some things here not decided yet, which would be nice, like request visualization. So when you make a request, you can see where it might land in a hierarchy. They're the kind of things which are on the roadmap. Not sure if and when they will happen in 11.124 dot whatever or 11.1. 11.2. I can't get used to saying 11.2. Or in 11.2. So there are exciting things happening to the on-prem product. So what DRM looks like right now, because I want to show you what it looks like now so we can look at the future product, looks a bit different. So that's just some section of a balance sheet account in DRM with properties. Anyone not recognize that? Well, I hope you all recognize that. All you ones who said I have DRM should recognize that, with a bit of luck. So, okay. So that's what DRM actually looks like. It's a browser-based application, as you all know. It's come a long way since the first browser-based release. I've got very familiar with it. It's actually quite fast. And earlier this year, a release significantly changed the architecture behind the scenes in terms of the number of engines that it requires to run it, which actually has enhanced performance quite significantly. And I think most of our customers didn't even know we did that. When you do the upgrade, it's fairly seamless. I'm not looking at Steve, because he might have an opinion about how seamless that is. But it is a relatively fast-performing tool now. One thing to say about DRM, why it actually works quite well for example, quickly calculating inherited or derived attributes. When I load a version in DRM, a set of hierarchies, it's all dumped into memory on the server. It's all in memory there. And that means it's quite fast, but there's a limit to what you can actually do before you start running out of memory. Yeah, you can throw RAM into those servers, 128 gigabytes and so on, but you will still hit a limit if, for example, you want to put in 300 million customer records. So what we're looking at in the future is maybe into the new cloud release, enabling much more scalability. So I will get to that. So it's important to remember that the power that you get in DRM is based upon it being in memory. So there's going to be some trade-offs about how we actually scale and deal with that performance. Okay. DRG, I think if you haven't implemented DRG, it kind of looks like this. Here's an incredibly simple workflow request in process. I am adding a new account for paid vacation expenses. These are properties, attributes in DRM, which are in this stage of the workflow. Who hasn't seen anything like this before? Oh, a few. Okay, so this is our workflow process. We'll have a little miniature model of the workflow here. It's just an incredibly simple three-step workflow. We're highlighted, we're on stage 2. We passed stage 1 with a little bit green tick. And here are the properties. Yeah, careful, Robin. I don't want to have to file a workers' comp claim in my last 2 days. So. Actually, that's interesting, because I got involved with this company because I was doing a project at the Texas Workers' Comp Insurance Fund in Austin. That's where I picked up my accent. And I worked with a couple of guys, Christopher Dwight, and I hired this lady called Monica into the company I was working for, and she introduced me to her boyfriend, a guy called Doug Cosby. And a few years later, if any of you know Doug, when I got my green card, he actually hired me to come into the progenitor of this product into a company which eventually became Rouser. So it's just through randomly hiring someone that at the Workers' Comp Insurance Fund, I got here. So, so these are the attributes in DRM. It's not rocket science, right? In this workflow area, you can, if you wish, if these attributes, for example, had goofy names that made no sense to man nor beast, but that's just because it's being configured, maybe with prefixes or something like that. You can change what's displayed here in Prettyfight and put comments underneath and stuff like that. So that's what the workflow module actually looks like. You do not design forms. You just say, I want these attributes in this order, and it will show you them. If you're doing a change request, it will show the before and after over here, so you can see where you're heading. So, I can be moderately honest about it now. I think this is actually quite easy to actually configure, but you're limited to what you actually can configure. So, swings and roundabouts. But in general, the ease of configuring it to me beats having to build a bunch of forms and design them and so on. So it is relatively straightforward. So on balance, I'm actually quite enthusiastic about all this. Now, DRMA, that's a relatively newish module. It's only been out about 18 months. There's some analytics on top. It has some dashboards and reports. You can drill down into them, and they will drill all the way down into DRM and show the individual in-flight workflow requests if you go so far. So it's quite a neat little tool. It kind of looks like our cloud products, doesn't it? Yes, Robin? But it's not. It's a little standalone application that's designed to give that look and feel of our newer cloud applications. So, DRM, its approach to this thing called data governance. I was going to ask you, some of you, your opinion about what data governance means, but that would be a very long discussion. To me, data governance, it's a semantic argument. What does it mean to different people? It depends upon your organization, what you actually mean by that. So when we built this, we thought there was some degree of adding control into DRM about how you actually make changes, processes, responsibilities, workflows, maybe try and avoid all those god-awful committees and whatever and so on that go on. But some degree of nimbleness, if that's a word, about adopting to change quickly, meeting deadlines, maybe sharing content. So trying to make the workflow not a constraint upon how people do things, but accelerating it. Doug thought sticky was a good word to describe it. That is, its workflow becomes something people adopt and see value in and don't try and avoid it. I come from a nation of people who will never see any kind of bureaucracy. Even if it's for our own good, we try and avoid it and work our way around it. We like undermining petty officials and things like that. It's in our nature. So people have done that with governance programs I've worked on for many, many years. Many have failed because people just sidestepped it because it was too awkward, too irritating, it was driving them batty. It wasn't letting them get their work done. So whatever we want to do, we want to try and make it something that business will adopt and embrace. So now we're heading to the cloud. This is a generic Oracle cloud slide. You have seen a ton of this week. Well, maybe not, but we all know why many organizations are moving to the cloud for productivity, blah, 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 blah. I won't go through all that. So the cloud is here for real. So what I wanted to say before we got into DMCS, or whatever it's going to be called, on-premise DRM, which we have there, which is based on a Windows Server and IIS, that's kind of the infrastructure stack it sits on, with an Oracle or SQL Server backend. DRM, as it stands now, is a great tool for accelerating migration to the cloud, and most of the customers I know who I've been out and sold products to with our sales team who are buying PBCS or FCCS, they are not for a long time going to have a uniquely cloud environment. They're going to have a hybrid environment for a very long time. So you're going to be wanting to feed the dimensions to on-prem, off-prem, ERP, EPM, Oracle, non-Oracle. So there will be a very big hybrid environment for a while. So DRM, as it stands, all it needs to do to feed those cloud apps is generate a text file which those cloud apps will consume. So DRM right now, you can get it to generate your chart of accounts, use EPM Automate, will just set that thing right in and load it into your PBCS app or your HFM app or FCCS app. It's relatively straightforward to configure that. There's some quirks and nuances to it, but it's not, I can do it, so it can't be that hard. Because I was learning this for the first time and I got all that stuff to just work on my Mac on a VM image, so it can't be that hard. So I think for all the reasons here, DRM is a great tool when you're migrating to the cloud. It's an opportunity to clean up your dimensions and hierarchies. It's a great tool to go across and find all these obscure things you've got out there and consolidate them together and make sure you've got a clean thing you actually want to put into your shiny new cloud applications. So I think it can accelerate that cloud deployment and reduce risk, which is important to both the partners who are here and to the customers who are actually having to accomplish this. And then going forward, DRM doesn't care whether it's feeding a cloud application or an on-prem application. It's just, it will either hit it with a flat file, or something will come through web services and pull the data, or we'll dump it into some staging tables. Wherever it's going doesn't really matter, so we can support a coexistence strategy. So again, this isn't a sales pitch. I'm not trying to say that DRM, as you have it now, you don't need to move away from it if you have it to support migrating to the cloud and a hybrid cloud strategy. Lots of our customers are actually doing that. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. And what you've probably, another part of this which I want to stress is that many people think of DRM from a perspective of a mastering tool. I hate the word master data management, MDM. To me, that's a four-letter word. I think it has a bad reputation, unless there's any MDM people looking around here. No. I had that discussion with one of our competitors who I see hiding on the back row there, near the back row, that MDM is not really a good thing to put in your name. So, but a lot of people think it's just about routine changes, originating, sourcing, changing content, having that golden record. I've always argued that, particularly for what we do in more of the Hyperion world, you probably have multiple versions of the truth, not a single version of the truth. You want to see this account or cost center differently in different contexts with different attributes. You don't want it in this dimension. You want this hierarchy cut off or outline cut off at a different level. So there isn't really that concept of mastering a single record of Robin Peel as a customer. It's a little bit different. But we can still do all of this traditional, mastering-ish kind of stuff. But the transformational stuff is just as important. We've talked about these two, migrating to the cloud or supporting a coexistence strategy, rationalizing ERPs, whether cloud or on-prem, reorgs, mergers, acquisitions. DRM has tools to support all that. So what you've already got, I'm trying to stress, is a very rich, powerful tool within DRM. It will support where you're actually heading to on the cloud. Okay, I'm going to skip over that. So the vision for dimension management in the cloud. So I'm still using I think I eliminated every reference to DMCS here, and it's kind of pointless me having done that because I've said DMCS about 10 times already, but okay. So I was coming from the context of when we're heading to the cloud, we're looking to simplify. And I have several hobbies, some of them slightly nerdy. Well, I am an instrument-rated pilot. I like flying. So here's a 1960s era Boeing 707. So there's lots of these analogies about what the cloud actually means. But there's a lot of data here that you're looking at. 4 stacks of instruments, 1 for each engine. So there's a lot of information out there. This is all very manual controlled airplane. Kind of a lot of fun to fly, but if one of those little needles flickers because there's a little oil leak on number 3 engine, you just don't notice that. And it's a dark and stormy night, and you're climbing out from Honolulu over the Pacific. You might want to notice that. So it's kind of difficult to see true information from this morass of stuff. Actually, by the way, I thought it was funny. All of this stuff, they have like a $500 GPS unit glued to the top of a little Garmin. I think it's a Garmin 495, so it's maybe an $800 unit, glued to the top of the glare shield up there. And this is what modern aircraft look like. That's what the 787 looks like looking out the front. So you have a heads-up display. We're at 338 knots, 15,000 feet. The autopilot's in VNAV. It captured the altitude, LNAV mode, and controlling the speed. So you can see exactly what's going on. It's actually very easy. So you have true information on there. So what we're trying to do, moving DRM not moving DRM, it's in a whole new application, but what we're trying to do is make a lot more insightful what we can actually see and do. So that's one of the actual goals. So here's DRM. This should all make sense to you. We're mastering, generally mastering dimensions in an enterprise view. So we had this discussion in Julia's session, right? We're talking about one of the issues of implementing DRM we often try and make people do. Try and think about what that master enterprise view of your chart for counts should be, from which we can generate what these 10 S-base cubes need, SAP needs, and so on. And there's a lot of upfront design work goes to get to that before you even start deploying anything in DRM. It's a very theoretical, almost like a logical modeling exercise. I think it's quite useful, but there's a lot of design work before you see any value in an implementation sometimes. And sometimes you get people saying, I'm just going to dump into DRM my outline from this cube, and then you have 50 hierarchies in DRM, and you've lost the point of actually using DRM. But that's kind of this concept of having a master enterprise view of a particular... You're laughing, is that what you guys do? Okay. So, anyone here from France? Okay, so I can talk about the French, which is... No, easy joke. No, there was a large organization in France, I won't even say the sector, but they asked me to go there and look at why DRM wasn't working. And they were doing exactly that. Every month, we're throwing about 30 hierarchies into DRM, trying to figure out why they were different, fix them in DRM. The next month, they'd get rid of them and bring them back in again, and complain to me that DRM wasn't adding any value. It's like, you're missing the point, right? You should be mastering it in DRM, not just endlessly loading in as like an operational MDM process. That's the wrong thing to do. So some people do that. They didn't take criticism well. So the DRM is on a Windows Server platform right now. Lots of customers leverage some kind of virtualization, whether it's on, heaven forbid, AWS, a competitor of ours, or you can do that. I have it running on a VM image on my MacBook Pro. Works great. It's scalable to 1 million or so active nodes. That means a version that has, about that number you can load, and depending on your server and your memory and so on, you can actually get that many in there and have okay-ish performance. It's gotten better actually doing that. Technology has moved on, hardware has moved on. And we have a robust versioning model where we have versions that contain a bunch of hierarchies that usually reflect a period-by-period set of content. They can contain whatever you want. Most customers use those things to represent that. So where we're going with DMCS is quite different. You probably already read this while I was criticizing the French. So we're looking for a true cloud application. This is not a lift and shift of the product. This is a completely new application written from the ground up in a new environment using the agile methodology. So it's a completely new application. We're looking for very strong visualization. So, for example, when you put a workflow request in, you can see where it's going to be in the hierarchy, color-coded and banded, so you actually know exactly where it is. You can see it as soon as it's actually in there. We're looking at visualization from the point of view that you can see in DMCS, you can see in DMCS exactly what is going to go to that individual cube. So you're not worrying, I'm going to run an export from DRM. Is it going to filter out that thing I really didn't want to show? Is it really going to filter out that salary information I really don't want to go over there? You will see in DMCS this view. We call them, it will be technically called a view section. And that is exactly what we're going there. And you just can click the synchronize button and off it goes. So that whole process is just different. It's all about visualization. As with any product, version 1 is going to be an interesting subset of our vision. Is that a reasonable way? Is that how Matt Bradley would put it? I don't know. Anyway, so version 1 is going to be limited in scope, as probably all of our cloud offerings. There's some reasons for that. So we're originally going to be focusing on the EPM, GL, and finance domains, and then we will later scale it to support much larger domains. So remember I said DRM is an in-memory product, everything's stored in RAM. The goal here is to have the option of having, I think we're going to call it high availability and low availability, so that you can put stuff in RAM if you wish and have very rapid response, just like now, or you can put a lot more records in there, but be pulling it from storage, and the performance will just be different, probably not as good. And some things like rapidly updating derived or inherited properties may not be immediately available. It's just those trade-offs you actually make. So that's what we're talking about here, being much more scalable. But that now means, you want to put 300 million customers in here? That might work well, I don't know. But that's roadmap issues, very much beyond what we're talking about, what we hope to get out here this year. So in the context of a safe harbor, please bear that in mind. The other thing we're aiming at is rapid delivery of value. So when I was saying, I think the discussion Julia and I had about you have to do a lot of design work up front before you see value from DRM. We are hoping we can have much more rapid delivery of value, because you can get the content into DRM very quickly and start sharing it almost immediately. Just set up that one bit of that one dimension, start getting that up to snuff, and deliver that value very quickly. And as you build out more business rules or processes or governance, start sharing that to others of these views and build it up more incrementally. And Doug Cosby, the VP of Development, I think he might have even trademarked that through Oracle. Baby step, I think he got baby step rationalization. Is that the word he was using, Steve? Yeah, I think it is baby step rationalization. Who said yes? Did someone say yes or BS? Okay. So that is a concept that I may be dealing with the balance sheet and set up some business rules about how to actually control that. The guy who's taking care of the assets might say, hey, that looks pretty cool. Can I borrow your business rules and your workflow model? Yeah, go and have them. So it's more of a sharing approach to governance rather than a very prescriptive workflow approach to governance. And I've been walking around here looking at the competitor products this week for fairly obvious reasons that Monday is a whole new start for me. And I've seen in general a shift towards that approach away from very prescriptive governance to a more open sharing approach to governance. Just in general is what I've seen. You guys may think differently. It comes back to that this concept of data governance is a very fluid one. It depends who you are and what you're actually trying to accomplish. So there's a lot more about what we were trying to do, but that's actually at the heart of what's the difference between the two. And hopefully I'll say it one more time. This is not that ported to the cloud. This is a whole new product, whole new code set, whole new data model behind there. So bear that in mind. A question might be, how do I migrate from here to here? I think we will have tools to migrate your content. Again, I can't, with all the issues about roadmap and whatever, don't trust me, I'm not a development guy, right? I'm not even really an Oracle guy anymore. But I think we will have tools to support that migration, but the actual configuration data, the definition of properties, and so on, those are going to be so different, I don't think those will be easily portable. So there'll be, I wouldn't say this is a whole new deployment, but it will be a fairly significant redeployment. On the other hand, you will get the value out of it relatively quickly. So I'm trying to be honest. So, okay. So that was the summary of what we're trying to do. So this is what the home screen looks like. The observant amongst you might notice that up here, I kind of fuzzed out where it says Dimension Management Cloud Services. I was going to try and write something else in there in red crayon, but I'm not that good at PowerPoint. So this looks very similar to the other EPM apps, right? This is actually, there's a code name for this, and I've forgotten what it is. Forgive me, whoever invented it. This is version 2 of the EPM interface. We're the first product to use it. So it's an updated, there's some subtlety about how this looks and how it works. It's a different color. It's not blue, right? So, though you can customize that. I have on my own little private thing now. But this is, we are prototyping a new look and feel for the interface and some new ideas there. The interface guy who designed the whole EPM cloud applications took us under his arms and did it, which is cool. So I wanted to compare this to what DRM looked like. All of these things, if you can read that from the back, these are probably familiar concepts to DRM users. There might be some things there you're wondering, what is a hierarchy set? What is a... Actually, that's about the only one that looks kind of new. Views, when you drill down into views, there where you get into the view sections, which I'll show you in a minute, there where you actually get into that instantiated, visualized view of exactly what the application is going to get. And then over here, your routine announcements, it's just like the other Hyperion apps, right? But your requests, your workflow requests, you can drill down in here and see them. I think it's a much cleaner interface for the business users coming here to maintain it. And I deliberately put a picture of DRG up here. That's what a user would see logging into DRG, the workflow tool. It has this stuff, all these outstanding requests up here. It's not bad, but for a regular business user to see. You probably might not see some of this stuff here. But it's a little, I think, this is more intuitive. It's more like everything else he's using on the Hyperion stack. So I wanted to just show you those two things side by side. Okay, so version 1 is always an interesting process. So version 1, the goal is to support finance transformations and reorg kind of projects, probably for new customers rather than existing customers. They will probably get value from that. Again, that's in that similar vein, M&A activity. And doing dimension maintenance across multiple applications. So these are some of the capabilities we hope to have in version 1. Onboarding content from applications to actually get it into DRM. By the way, there's a new top-level construct in DRM called an application. That's how DRM knows about an external application. We'll have we'll call them application adapters to connect to it, which are just configurations, step-by-step, complete this information to hook up to this planning application, to your data warehouse, your B application. We're hoping to provide some out of the box. We talked about that at the partner meeting on Monday lunchtime. Maybe they would like to give some input into that process about actually building those. But you can build your own with a generic application adapter. So we have that concept of application. Once that's built, it can bring the information, the content in, the hierarchies in, and push it back out without having to write imports and exports. Imports and exports are kind of gone. They don't really exist. So all they're really there for is to get content in from somewhere and push it back. So once you've defined how you connect to another application, that's all you actually need to do. So that's an important actual construct in there. So, so yeah, that's using that same process there. So, I'll come over to this side so I can actually read this better. So, generically, how do we actually onboard applications? Well, you can have whatever you want out here, bring it across through that adapter and bring it into within the DM cloud, dimension management cloud, whatever. Bring it into DRM, into these different views. Now, you may have a different view for the GL account and the planning and budgeting account. This may be a flat list of GL accounts. This might be a rich, deep hierarchy, and you will see them as that in DRM, however you want to display them, or you can flip between them on the fly. So the goal is to get this into DRM in ways that you can actually visualize it. And if your accounting people just want to go and edit that flat list of account, they can go in there and edit them here. If your planning people want to go and edit them in a rich, deep hierarchy, they can go and do it in here. So they will see it in a way that makes sense to them, is actually the goal of getting into DRM that way. So once we're actually in DMCS, forgive me, well, whatever it is. So once we're actually in here, this is just an example of a tree. I mean, there's only so many ways you can represent a tree. And I'm kind of ambivalent about this. I kind of like DRM's more tighter structure. I actually think looks nicer to me. I think some of the other cloud outline editors, it's just too much white space for me, and I wish you could actually adjust that. But that's just my personal preference. But anyway, so there's a tree. There's, you can configure all of this. There's a tree, its name, properties, no rocket science there. It's very similar to how DRM actually approaches this. But what is important, and I'm sorry I didn't get one with better names on, these sections will be those instantiated views. It could be your GL view of the accounts. It could be your planning view of accounts. It could be your consolidation view of your accounts. Those are what these sections here would actually represent. Over here you have some of this social stuff and other stuff relating to work, in-flight workflows would be listed here. I think I've just got comments here. I don't see any actual workflows kicking around on here. I might have to go back and find some of those. But that's kind of what it will look like. It's not rocket science. I think it does look like a slightly more cloudy version of DRM, a cloud version of DRM. Sorry, DRM itself is browser-based, so that's just a more cloud version of it. Likewise, getting that content back out, it's really the exact opposite of getting it back in. We're coming from these views in DRM and just send it right over there through whatever process you want. Like now, it could be a flat file, it could be web services, it could be a database table. You can just configure how that connection actually runs. So that part was actually deceptively simple. Do you want me to go back to any of those? How are we doing for time? Oh, we're not doing too bad. I'll probably go back to here. It's probably the more interesting thing. There's probably not much more I can say about the details of this, because some of it is still a little indeterminate. The dev team has built a little click-through demo that shows a few more advanced features. They wouldn't give me that without a bouncer from the development team next to me in case I showed too much, so I didn't have that. They have built one, so if you're really excited about this, in a few weeks or a few months' time, that will probably be available through various channels for you to actually get a hold of. So there is quite a rich set of functionality there. I was away on vacation for 2 weeks in the UK, and when I came back, the amount of new stuff had been added actually did pleasantly surprise me. This is being built using the Agile methodology, and I'm not too familiar with the methodology. What I do know is it's an interesting process to go through to build it, but when they actually deliver a release, I've been very impressed how stable it is. It has not crashed on me once yet. It's worked. It has occasionally not done anything when I click something, but it hasn't crashed. And that's okay. It's just someone hadn't written some code behind that button. But it never actually bombs out, or it's never messed up any content for me. I think that's a part of the Agile methodology. It's not quite as agile as you might think, but what it delivers is generally higher quality, is what I've seen from going through this. So I've been quite excited to actually see that. So that's all content I actually had to say. I'm sure no one has any questions. And I'm going to make a run for the door at 5 o'clock. Anyway, I'm sure there are a bunch of questions. I'll do my best to answer them. There's some I don't know, and some they'd rather I didn't tell you, because it's still a work in progress. So, yeah.
Can you still do all the scripting and stuff, creating new properties and all that, like cloud?
Yes and no. Eventually, yes, you can. You'll be able to create the properties and have derived properties and inheritance and so on. Out of the box up front in V1, what capabilities will be there will be fairly limited. For example, I don't think inheritance will work in the first release. So it's going to be very limited. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but the first release of this, the code has to be complete 3 months before it goes generally available, because it has to go to the cloud guys to actually put up into the cloud platform, do whatever magic they do, and that's a long process. Once we've done that the first time, subsequent updates are very rapid because that's all set up. Unlike the other cloud applications, we can deliver reliable updates seamlessly to the users, and you will actually get that. So the code will need to be complete on this very, very shortly to actually meet those deadlines, and some things didn't make it. But guess what? There's going to be now 4 months now before the next release where quite a lot can actually get done. So version 1.01, or what it will be, will rapidly adopt some of those missing features. There's a long list of those things. I'd rather not get into it because it might change. I suspect it possibly not for the better, but it probably will change. But I'm not too worried, because I think by the time anyone gets near to going production in version 1, a lot of this stuff will already be added. Yeah?
Is there any difference in the data model of the master data that it's managing?
Do you mean the data model, how we're actually storing the content in the repository?
No, I don't care about that.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I do. But.
well, I'm glad you don't care, actually, because that's an interesting question about the data model. Yes.
Can you tell me what's different about it?
Not in less than about an hour, no. Some concepts are actually very similar. So you have nodes, you have hierarchies, you have node types. So that's all very similar. How they're represented and how you see them here has changed significantly. So these view sections, these are not just a filtered list of a masked set of stuff. It's more sophisticated than that. And there is a chain of stuff that gets you to that. We've called it the BFC for the big chain that gets you to that. No, that's a chunk that we store it as. No, so there's a chunk chain that gets you to this, which actually is a series of criteria, but they're not just filters. So I want this node type, I want this hierarchy set, I want this application. And that's how that all works is it's one of the things we need to do some education on both to internally and externally about that. So that is a little bit different. But fundamentally, hierarchies, relationships, nodes, that's very familiar. The concept of relationships, which right now in DRM, relationships are just parent-child relationships that drive a hierarchy. They could do other things. They can create networks, I would think, or mappings, or intersections as first-class objects. I say that with love because I remember working with Doug Cosby in 2004 designing this thing called matrixing for DRM. And we're nearly there now. Matrixing was a many-to-many intersection, so you can combine two things together with whatever you want, and adding to that intersection attributes, properties, change, control, governance about the actual intersection. So it's a great way of defining mappings, obviously, but other more interesting stuff too. So the data model supports that. It's not going to be in V1, maybe not until V2. So that's an example of how, rather than having a simple parent-child structure, we're going a lot further down the road. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, what I noticed in the past 3-4 days,
Yeah.
the Oracle is coming out with a bunch of silos of
Yeah.
cloud products.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like the EPMA, the umbrella module for all the silos connecting.
Yeah.
Some master data and
I can only say that the products are still planning FCCS, DRM, Dimension Management Cloud Services, and so on. By the way, and you guys who are leaving, please fill in an evaluation. So it's a pretty good crowd, so I'd love to get those. And they should.
Out of forms, and I got more, so
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, and there's a basket at the back of them.
Robin, to the question.
Yeah.
Rich Wilkie did say, at least from the Plus side,
Yeah.
you will start seeing you log in, you
Yeah.
click on a card you're in like planning, but you do something over here in
Yeah.
the other suites. So there is going to start seeing like.
I have a desktop over here. When we're done, I'll see if I can start it up. I have an example of one of those. It's actually not a working demo, but it actually is a click-through demo that can show you that you can click from card to card to card, and you don't even know or care what application you're in. It doesn't matter,
So
which is
it's
kind of cool.
like separate now, but that blending is going
Yeah.
to come.
something like EPMA.
So I'm going to turn the microphone off. I'm back on. Name doesn't really matter. It is a new product from the ground up. But you can see when I went back to, when I came back to here, most of these things probably look terribly familiar. Users, properties, node, maybe node sets, that's a new one. That's a new one. Node types, that's a new one. That's a new one. So yeah, there's some. You will not find it very hard to figure this out, but the point about this chunk chain or data chain that gets you to all of these individual views, that is a little complex, and that could be an hour-long presentation at KScope next year, which I might do.
So it's early, and this may not be your realm, but how about pricing? Has there been any conversations about pricing DRM compared to this product?
Yes. That's beyond my pay grade. I've had my input into that process, and nothing's decided, so I'm not going to go down that road. So, yeah. Yeah. So I'm not being facetious. I do know what they're going to do, but they need to figure it out in more detail before we actually go into that.